Welcome back to the channel where we remember the women who once lit up the screen, the stage, and the hearts of millions. Today, we look back on the lives of over 30 American female celebrities whose stories ended far too soon. Not because of fame, scandal, or age, but due to surgery. Some trusted the process for healing. Others hoped for transformation. But what was meant to save or change their lives instead brought it to a sudden end. Whether the procedure was medical or cosmetic, the outcome was devastating. These were actresses, singers, models, each with a story, a following, and a future. And in the quiet moments after the headlines faded, what remained was heartbreak. This compilation honors those women, their legacies, and the silence that followed the final breath taken too soon in a hospital room. Mary Wickes, a legendary character actress known for her quick wit and sharp comedic timing, left an indelible mark on Hollywood before her tragic passing at the age of 85. She was born Mary Isabella Wickenhauser on June 13, 1910, in University City, Missouri. And from a young age, she displayed an intelligence and humor that would later define her career. Though she initially planned to become a lawyer, the pull of the stage was too strong, and she soon found herself immersed in the world of acting. Over decades, she became a familiar face in film and television, often portraying stern but lovable characters, nurses, nuns, teachers, and housekeepers, who never hesitated to deliver a perfectly timed, sarcastic remark. She appeared in classics like White Christmas, The Man Who Came to Dinner, The Music Man, and Sister Act, where her comedic brilliance shined through. Despite her enduring career, her final years were marked by suffering. Health issues plagued her, and she eventually suffered a devastating fall that resulted in a broken hip. It was a cruel turn of fate for someone who had brought so much joy to audiences. After undergoing surgery, complications arose, and on October 22, 1995, she passed away at UCLA Medical Center. It was a heartbreaking end for a woman whose presence had been larger than life. In one of her final roles, she lent her voice to Laverne, the wisecracking gargoyle in Disney's The Hunchback of Notre Dame, though she tragically died before completing all her lines. Even in her last moments on screen, she brought laughter and warmth to audiences, just as she had done throughout her life. Mary Wickes never married, nor did she have children, but she left behind a legacy of unforgettable performances that continue to entertain and inspire. Her impact was recognized posthumously when she was inducted into the St. Louis Walk of Fame, and her generosity continued beyond her death through a multi-million-dollar bequest supporting the arts. She may be gone, but her voice, her presence, and the laughter she brought to the world remain timeless. Helen Chandler, a once radiant star of Hollywood's golden age, known best for her hauntingly delicate performance as Mina Seward in the 1931 horror classic Dracula, lived a life that began with brilliance but ended in heartbreaking obscurity. Born in the early 1900s, though the exact date remains uncertain, she was a child of the stage, pushed into the limelight by an overbearing mother who saw her not as a daughter, but as a means to an end. By the time she reached Hollywood, she had already conquered Broadway, acting alongside legends like John and Lionel Barrymore. Her talent undeniable, her presence ethereal. She was praised for her fragility, her porcelain-like beauty, and her ability to embody sorrow on screen. But behind the camera, that sorrow was all too real. By the late 1930s, as Hollywood shifted toward a new era, Helen's career began to fade, and with it, so did her spirit. She turned to alcohol, a crutch that would soon consume her, leading to years of struggles, hospitalizations, and desperate attempts to reclaim what she had lost. In 1950, her addiction led to a horrific accident. She fell asleep while smoking, setting her apartment ablaze, suffering devastating burns that forever scarred her once enchanting face. The world that once adored her had moved on, and Helen, now broken in ways both visible and unseen, withdrew from the public eye. Her final years were spent in and out of institutions, battling demons that never loosened their grip, relying on the kindness of the Motion Picture Relief Fund to survive. The pain never truly left her, and on April 30th, 1965, at just 59 years old, She died following complications from surgery in Hollywood, California. Her death, another silent tragedy in an industry that had long forgotten her. Her remains were cremated, tucked away in obscurity until 2023, when, thanks to devoted fans and researchers, her ashes were finally given a resting place worthy of her legacy at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Helen Chandler was never meant to be a footnote in history. She was luminous, a soul yearning for love and stability that never came. She was the epitome of the fleeting nature of fame, a reminder of how the industry chews up its brightest stars and leaves them to fade into darkness. Yet, in every frame of Dracula, in every whisper of her voice on Lux Radio, she still lives, a fragile yet unforgettable echo of a Hollywood that no longer exists. Joan Rivers, a trailblazing comedian and television icon, was known for her razor-sharp wit and fearless humor, but her final days were marked by tragedy. On August 28, 2014, what was supposed to be a routine throat procedure at an outpatient clinic in Manhattan turned into a nightmare when she stopped breathing during the surgery. She was rushed to Mount Sinai Hospital, where she was placed on life support, but she never regained consciousness. After days of hope and uncertainty, her daughter Melissa Rivers faced the heartbreaking decision to let her go. On September 4, Joan Rivers passed away at the age of 81 due to brain damage caused by a lack of oxygen. Investigations later revealed a series of shocking medical failures, including the clinic's failure to monitor her deteriorating vital signs, an unauthorized biopsy performed without her consent, and possible errors in anesthesia administration. Her death was not just a loss to comedy, but a devastating reminder of medical negligence. Joan Rivers wasn't just a comedian, she was a pioneer, a woman who broke barriers in a male-dominated industry. Born Joan Alexandra Malinsky on June 8, 1933, in Brooklyn, New York, to Russian Jewish immigrants, she was an intelligent and ambitious child who faced insecurities about her weight and appearance, struggles that would later fuel her brutally honest comedic style. She started performing stand-up in the 1960s, hustling through the comedy club scene alongside legends like George Carlin and Richard Pryor. Her big break came in 1965 when she appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, who saw her potential and championed her career. But Hollywood can be brutal, and after Carson turned his back on her for launching her own late-night show, Rivers faced one of her darkest periods. In 1987, after the cancellation of her show, her husband, Edgar Rosenberg, tragically took his own life. Left to rebuild from the wreckage, she fought her way back, reinventing herself as a red carpet queen, a best-selling author, and the biting voice of fashion police. Her career, spanning over 5 decades, was filled with accolades, including an Emmy, a Grammy, and a Tony nomination. But beyond the awards, she was a mother, a grandmother, and a woman who lived unapologetically on her own terms. Her funeral, attended by celebrities and close friends, was a grand tribute to the life she lived, bold, unfiltered, and unforgettable. Howard Stern delivered a eulogy fitting of her legacy, calling her a trailblazer who never backed down. Even in death, Joan Rivers left behind a legacy of laughter, resilience, and a reminder that comedy is sometimes the best way to face life's harshest realities. Ruth Hussey, a remarkable actress known for her sharp wit and elegance, left an unforgettable mark on Hollywood. But her final days were shadowed by complications from an appendectomy that tragically led to her passing on April 19, 2005, at the age of 93. Her son, John Longenecker, shared that she passed away at Mary Health of the Sick Convalescent Home in Newbury Park, California. Despite the sorrow, she found ways to bring humor even in her struggles, often telling her family she had Chollery marbles, a playful term her mother had coined for any ailment. Ruth had lived a long, fulfilling life, but in the end, even her resilience couldn't shield her from the silent dangers of a routine medical procedure that turned fatal. She was born in Providence, Rhode Island, on October 30, 1911, and from an early age, she faced hardships, losing her father to the Spanish flu when she was just 7. But despite the pain, she pushed forward, studying at Pembroke College and the University of Michigan before making her way into acting. At first, she was just a model and a radio fashion commentator. But a fateful audition in New York opened doors she never thought possible. MGM saw her potential, and soon, she was gracing the screen with Hollywood's biggest names. Her breakout moment came in 1940, when she played Elizabeth Embry, the quick-witted photographer in The Philadelphia Story, a performance that earned her an Academy Award nomination. She held her own against legends like Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant, and James Stewart, proving that her talent was undeniable. Over the years, she became known for her sophisticated and intelligent portrayals, starring in films like Flight Command, Northwest Passage, The Uninvited, and The Great Gatsby. But as time passed, she chose to step away from the limelight, focusing on her family and personal passions, like painting and charity work. Though she left Hollywood behind, she remained beloved, and her impact on classic cinema never faded. Then, in her 90s, she underwent an appendectomy, what should have been a straightforward surgery. But complications arose, and she never fully recovered. Her passing was a devastating loss, not just for her family, but for an industry that had long admired her grace and talent. Ruth Hussey lived a life full of achievement and perseverance, a woman who once stood alongside Hollywood's elite, and yet remained humble, kind, and full of life. In the end, she left behind more than just films. She left a legacy of strength, elegance, and quiet resilience that will never be forgotten. Joan Rivers, born Eleanor Dorothy Lovegren on March 25, 1916, was an American actress best remembered for playing Dale Arden in the legendary Flash Garden serials of the 1930s, captivating audiences with her beauty, charm, and talent. But behind the bright lights of Hollywood, her life took a quieter turn in later years, leading to a tragic end on February 24, 1991. Jean had once been the epitome of adventure on screen, battling villains and facing danger alongside Flash Garden. But in reality, her final days were marked by a far different struggle, one she couldn't escape. She passed away following complications from surgery, a stark contrast to the fearless, invincible image she had embodied in her films. The surgery, meant to help her, instead led to unforeseen complications that ultimately took her life, leaving behind a legacy of classic cinema and memories of a time when she reigned as one of the most beloved heroines of early Hollywood. Her death came as a quiet, almost forgotten moment in contrast to the thrilling world she had once inhabited on screen. Born in Belmont, Massachusetts, she had dreams of being an artist, but fate had other plans when a beauty contest won her a ticket to Hollywood. From the mid-1930s, she became a staple of adventure serials, starring in Flash Garden, Ace Drummond, and the adventures of Frank Merriwell, among others. Her chemistry with Buster Crabbe and her role as Dale Arden made her an icon of the sci-fi genre. But Hollywood, as it often does, failed to reward her talent with lasting stardom. Seeking more serious roles, she moved to feature films, appearing alongside John Wayne, Boris Karloff, and Tyrone Power. But the big breakout role never came. By the 1950s, her career had faded, and she stepped away from the limelight, choosing a life of quiet obscurity. Despite the glamour of her youth, her later years were far removed from the golden era she had once graced. She married Dan Winkler in 1943, and after his death in 1970, she largely lived away from public attention. Then, in 1991, what should have been a routine medical procedure became the final chapter of her story. She died at the age of 74. Her contributions to cinema are remembered by those who cherished the serials of old, but her name largely forgotten by the mainstream. A woman who had once been at the heart of intergalactic battles, who had survived explosions and daring rescues on film, ultimately succumbed to the fragility of human life. Her ashes were returned to her family, a quiet farewell for a woman who had once lived in the thrilling world of Saturday matinee serials. Though time has moved on, her legacy endures in the hearts of classic film lovers who still see her as the brave and beautiful Dale Arden, forever trapped in an era of adventure, fighting against the odds, just as she did in life. Jane Randolph, a name etched in the golden era of Hollywood, became immortal through her chilling performances in classic horror and noir films. Born on October 30th, 1914, in Youngstown, Ohio, she was raised in Kokomo, Indiana, where her love for golf and flying shaped her adventurous spirit. Her dreams led her to Hollywood in 1939, where she struggled before landing a contract with Warner Bros., later moving to RKO, where she found her breakthrough. But it wasn't the glitz and glamour of Hollywood that defined the final chapter of her life. It was the quiet solitude of her later years, ending in an unexpected tragedy. On May 4, 2009, Jane Randolph passed away at the age of 94 in Gstaad, Switzerland, from complications following a broken hip. What should have been a recoverable injury spiraled into something fatal, a cruel reminder of the frailty of age. In her final days, she was far from the flashing cameras and the world that once adored her, spending her twilight years between Los Angeles and Switzerland, where she had settled after retiring from acting. Once a vibrant actress who lit up the screen with her sharp performances, Jane found herself battling the limitations of time. The same woman who once portrayed fearless, independent women on screen now faced a slow, painful decline. The broken hip left her immobile, and the complications that followed proved too much for her aging body. The quiet dignity with which she lived her final years was a stark contrast to the eerie, suspenseful scenes that defined her film legacy. Hollywood remembered her for roles that played on fear, her footsteps echoing through deserted streets, the terror in her eyes as she swam alone, sensing something lurking in the shadows. She was the first pin-up girl for Yank, the US Army magazine, a femme fatale in noir classics, and a victim of unseen horrors in Val Lewton's legendary thrillers. Her most famous role in Cat People, 1942, saw her embody Alice Moore, the intelligent, confident woman whose fear became the audience's fear. But beyond the celluloid nightmares, Jane lived a full life, one that took her from Hollywood's spotlight to the lavish social circles of Spain, where she married businessman Jamie Del Amo and left the industry behind. When he passed away, she drifted between Los Angeles and Europe, a woman whose life had taken her through decades of cinematic history, only to end in the silence of an unexpected medical complication. There were no dramatic farewells, no grand tributes as she faded away in a distant land. But her legacy, much like the haunting scenes she once inhabited, lingers. Eartha Kitt was a force of nature, a singer, actress, and activist whose voice could purr or roar, captivating audiences for decades. But behind the glamour and the fame, she carried a life of hardship, resilience, and an untamed spirit that refused to be silenced, even in her final moments. Born on January 17, 1927, in North, South Carolina, to a mother of African American and Cherokee descent and a white father she never knew. Her early years were marked by rejection and cruelty, shunned for her pale skin, abused by those who should have protected her. But it wasn't just her talent that defined her. It was her unyielding defiance in 1968, at a White House luncheon. She dared to speak against the Vietnam War, a moment that led to her being blacklisted in the US for years. Yet she fought back, rebuilding her career on her own terms, mesmerizing audiences on Broadway, in jazz clubs, and later as the unforgettable voice of Isma in The Emperor's New Groove, proving that reinvention was in her blood. But life, no matter how fiercely lived, must end. And for Eartha, it came on December 25, 2008. Yet even in her last days, she did not fade away gently. Her daughter, Kit Shapiro, described how her mother, true to her nature, left this world screaming at the top of her lungs, a testament to the sheer force of will that had driven her throughout her life, fighting until the very last breath. Eartha Kitt was never one to go quietly. She was a woman who lived unapologetically, challenged the world, and left an imprint so deep that even death could not silence her legacy. Though they are no longer with us, their memories live on. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as we continue to honor those who shaped history but left us too soon. Whitney Houston, the powerhouse voice that defined a generation, was found lifeless in a hotel bathtub on February 11, 2012, just hours before she was scheduled to attend a pre-Grammy party. At only 48 years old, Her death sent shockwaves through the world, a tragic end to a life once filled with unparalleled talent, success, and deep struggles. The official cause was accidental drowning, but her autopsy revealed a heartbreaking truth. Years of drug use had taken a severe toll, with cocaine found in her system, along with heart disease that made her vulnerable in that moment. Her final days were erratic, reports surfacing that she looked unsteady, out of sorts, and exhausted, her once radiant glow dimmed by years of personal battles. It was a devastating fall from grace for a woman who had once stood on top of the world. Born on August 9, 1963, in Newark, New Jersey, music was in her blood. Her mother, Cissy Houston, was a legendary gospel singer, and her cousin was none other than Dionne Warwick. From the moment she opened her mouth to sing, it was clear Whitney was destined for greatness. She dominated the 1980s and 90s with hits like I Wanna Dance with Somebody and I Will Always Love You, her voice soaring with a power and purity that no one could match. She broke barriers, becoming one of the first Black artists to achieve true pop superstardom, and her film debut in The Bodyguard only cemented her legendary status. But behind the fame, Whitney was fighting battles no one truly understood. Her marriage to Bobby Brown was tumultuous, marred by allegations of drug abuse, domestic violence, and public scandals that overshadowed her music. What had once been a dazzling career began to unravel as addiction took hold, and by the 2000s, her voice, once considered one of the greatest of all time, had suffered from years of drug use. Though she attempted comebacks, even releasing an album in 2009, her struggles were never far behind. On that fateful night at the Beverly Hilton, the world lost not just an icon, but a woman whose voice had defined love, heartbreak, and hope for millions. Her death came just one day before the Grammy Awards, turning what was meant to be a night of celebration into a somber farewell. Even in death, her legacy endures. Her music still sells in the millions. Her influence felt in every powerful ballad sung today. But the pain of losing her remains, a cruel reminder of how even the brightest stars can fade too soon. Whitney Houston wasn't just a singer, she was the voice, and the world has never quite recovered from losing her. Marilyn Miller, the shining star of Broadway's golden age, was a name that lit up marquees and dazzled audiences with her incredible talent. But behind the spotlight was a woman whose life was marred by heartbreak, illness, and a tragic end that came far too soon. Born Mary Ellen Reynolds on September 1, 1898, in Evansville, Indiana, Marilyn was thrust into the world of entertainment as a child, performing alongside her family in a vaudeville act. From the very beginning, she was destined for greatness, catching the attention of Broadway producers who turned her into a sensation. She became the ultimate rags-to-riches story, embodying grace, beauty, and charm, with a dazzling smile that made her the darling of musical comedy. She starred in legendary productions like Sally, Sonny, and Rosalie, leaving an unforgettable mark on the stage with her tap dancing and angelic voice. But beneath the glamour, Marilyn's personal life was filled with struggles. She endured toxic relationships, including a disastrous marriage to Jack Pickford, who was battling substance abuse, and she suffered the devastating loss of her first husband, Frank Carter, in a tragic car accident. As time went on, the pressures of fame, failed relationships, and the demands of show business began to take their toll. She turned to alcohol, a battle that would worsen as her health declined. Marilyn had long suffered from chronic sinus infections, and in March 1936, she was admitted to Doctors Hospital in New York, struggling with both her physical condition and a nervous breakdown. Despite undergoing multiple blood transfusions in a desperate attempt to recover, her body couldn't fight anymore. On April 7, 1936, at just 37 years old, Marilyn Miller passed away due to complications from a sinus surgery. A cruel and tragic end for someone who had once embodied youth and vitality on stage. Her death sent shockwaves through the entertainment world, and thousands gathered for her funeral, a heartbreaking testament to how deeply she was loved. Even in death, her legacy remained. Her story was immortalized in the 1949 film Look for the Silver Lining, a reminder of the light she once brought to the world. But behind the silver lining of her onstage persona was a woman who fought battles no audience could see. A woman who gave everything to her art, but was ultimately consumed by the very world that made her a star. Marion Nixon, a name that once shined brightly in Hollywood's golden era, lived a life full of glamour, talent, and quiet tragedy. Born Marja Nissanen on October 20, 1904, she grew up in Superior, Wisconsin, with Finnish roots that grounded her in humble beginnings before she found her way to the dazzling world of cinema. She started as a teenage dancer in vaudeville, slowly making her way into films, and by 1923, she had her first major role in Cupid's Fireman. Hollywood quickly took notice, naming her a Wampas baby star in 1924, and from there, her career flourished. She starred in over 70 films, transitioning seamlessly from silent films to talkies, a feat not every actress of her time could achieve. She shared the screen with legends like James Cagney, Al Jolson, and Spencer Tracy, bringing to life characters that left a lasting mark on audiences. But by 1936, at just 32, she walked away from the spotlight, choosing family over fame. Though her Hollywood chapter closed, she remained a beloved figure, having lived through a remarkable period in cinema history. But as the years passed, time took its toll. Her life, once filled with red carpets and flashing lights, grew quieter. In her later years, Marion faced serious health struggles. On February 11, 1983, she underwent open-heart surgery at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, a risky but necessary operation. But 2 days later, on February 13, complications arose, and the woman who had once danced her way into Hollywood's heart took her final bow at the age of 78. The news was heartbreaking. Marion Nixon, the woman who had once embodied the charm and beauty of early Hollywood, was gone. She was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, alongside other legends of the silver screen. Her death marked the end of an era, a silent reminder that even the brightest stars eventually fade. Yet, her legacy lives on through the films she left behind, each frame a testament to the talent and grace of a woman who once captivated the world. Myrna Loy, the luminous actress whose career spanned silent films to Hollywood's golden age, took her final breath on December 14, 1993, in New York City at the age of 88. The cause of death was complications from a long and undisclosed illness, her frail condition keeping her from even attending the Academy Awards in 1991, when she was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Oscar. Loy, who had once dazzled audiences with her charm and effortless grace, spent her last years away from the limelight, battling the declining health that eventually led to her passing during surgery at Lenox Hill Hospital. She had been living quietly, her public appearances rare, her once vibrant presence slowly fading into memory. Born Myrna Adele Williams on August 2, 1905, in Radersburg, Montana, she grew up surrounded by the wide-open landscapes of the American West. The death of her father during the 1918 flu pandemic forced the family to relocate to Los Angeles, where her mother hoped for a fresh start. It was there, in the city of dreams, that Loy's path to stardom began. Her striking beauty caught the attention of Hollywood, and she started out playing exotic vamps and mysterious femmes fatales in silent films, often typecast due to her distinctive features. But it was her role as Nora Charles in The Thin Man, 1934, that redefined her career and established her as a Hollywood icon, proving her gift for comedy and chemistry with co-star William Powell. As the years passed, she became one of the most beloved actresses of the 1930s and 40s, appearing in classics like The Best Years of Our Lives, Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House, and The Bachelor and the Bobby Soxer. Off-screen, she was deeply involved in humanitarian efforts, working with the Red Cross during World War II and later advocating for civil rights. Despite never receiving an Academy Award nomination, her contribution to cinema was undeniable, and in 1991, she was finally recognized with an honorary Oscar. But by then, time had taken its toll. She had spent her final years largely out of the public eye, her health quietly deteriorating. When she passed away, Hollywood lost one of its brightest stars, a woman who had redefined elegance and intelligence on screen. Her ashes were taken back to her home state of Montana, where they were laid to rest, a final return to the place where her journey began. Even in death, Myrna Loy remains a symbol of grace, talent, and the enduring magic of classic Hollywood. Irma Bombeck was a voice for millions, a humorist who found beauty and laughter in the chaos of everyday life. But behind her wit and charm was a struggle she kept hidden for years. Born on February 21, 1927, in Dayton, Ohio, Irma grew up in a working-class family, showing a love for writing from an early age. She pursued journalism, eventually becoming a household name with her syndicated column at Wit's End, and best-selling books that captured the absurdity and reality of suburban life. By the 1970s and 80s, she was one of the most beloved writers in America, making people laugh with her self-deprecating humor and relatable tales of motherhood, marriage, and the never-ending battle with housework. But while her words brought joy to millions, she was privately battling a disease she had carried since she was just 20 years old: polycystic kidney disease, a cruel and relentless condition. She endured years of dialysis, hiding her suffering while continuing to write, travel, and make television appearances. Even after surviving breast cancer and a mastectomy, she kept pushing forward, refusing to let illness define her. For years, she waited for a kidney transplant, her body growing weaker as time passed. Then, on April 3, 1996, she finally received the transplant she had been hoping for. But fate was unkind. Just weeks later, complications from the surgery took her life on April 22, 1996. She was only 69 years old. Her death left a void in the world of humor, a silence where laughter once echoed. She had spent her life making others smile, yet her final days were filled with struggle and pain. She never let the world see how much she suffered, because to her, bringing joy to others was more important than dwelling on her own pain. Her legacy lives on, not just in her words, but in the way she reminded us to find humor even in the darkest moments, to embrace the messiness of life, and to never take a single day for granted. Irma Bombeck wasn't just a writer. She was a friend to every person who ever read her work. And even though she is gone, her laughter will never fade. Florence Ballard's story is one of talent, heartbreak, and ultimate tragedy. A life that started with dreams of stardom, but ended in sorrow far too soon. As a founding member of the Supremes, she was a powerhouse vocalist who helped shape one of the most successful girl groups of all time, singing on numerous chart-topping hits. But despite the fame, her life was marked by deep struggles. By 1967, she was removed from the group she helped create, and what followed was a downward spiral of depression, alcoholism, and financial hardship. She attempted a solo career, but it never took off, and as the years passed, her health declined. In her final days, Florence was still holding on to hope for a comeback, but life had dealt her too many blows. On February 21, 1976, she was rushed to Mount Carmel Mercy Hospital, complaining of numbness in her arms and legs. Within hours, she suffered a massive heart attack caused by a blood clot in one of her coronary arteries, and by the next morning, she was gone, only 32 years old. It was a devastating end for a woman whose voice had once filled the world with joy, yet whose own life was filled with pain. Florence's journey had been rough from the start, growing up in Detroit in a large family that struggled to make ends meet. Her father, a former musician, introduced her to singing, and it became her passion. She formed the Supremes alongside childhood friends Mary Wilson and Diana Ross, and for a while, they were unstoppable. But behind the glitz and glamour, Florence battled personal demons, many of which stemmed from a horrific event in her teenage years, a brutal sexual assault that changed her forever. The trauma, combined with the pressures of fame, chipped away at her spirit. She was replaced in the Supremes, left to watch as the group continued to soar without her. Attempts to rebuild her career never gained traction, and by the mid-70s, she was living in near poverty with her 3 children. Just when it seemed she was getting back on her feet, death came unexpectedly, cutting short any chance of a second act. Today, Florence Ballard is remembered not just as a singer, but as a tragic figure in music history. One who had the world in her hands, but was ultimately cast aside. Though she is gone, her voice, her legacy, and the mark she left on music will never be forgotten. Frances Farmer was once one of Hollywood's most promising stars, a beautiful and talented actress who shined on both the silver screen and the Broadway stage. But behind the glamour, her life was marked by tragedy, mental illness, and years of unimaginable suffering. Born in Seattle in 1913, she had a rebellious spirit from a young age, winning a writing contest as a teenager and later pursuing a career in acting. She quickly rose to fame, starring in films like Come and Get It, Golden Boy, and Ride a Crooked Mile. But Hollywood never sat well with her. She despised the industry's control over her, clashed with producers, and turned to alcohol as she spiraled into depression. Her personal struggles soon overshadowed her career, and by the early 1940s, she was making headlines not for her performances, but for her erratic behavior and arrests. In 1942, after a series of public outbursts and run-ins with the law, she was declared mentally ill and institutionalized. What followed was nearly a decade of horrifying abuse. She was forcibly committed to psychiatric hospitals, where she later claimed she was subjected to ice baths, electric shock therapy, and even sexual assault by hospital staff. There were even rumors that she had been lobotomized, though no medical records ever confirmed it. Whether or not she underwent that procedure, there was no denying the cruelty she endured during her time in asylums. By 1950, she was finally released, broken, and a shell of the vibrant actress she once was. She tried to rebuild her life, working as a television host in Indianapolis and acting in small theater productions, but she was never the same. In her final years, she sought solace in religion and attempted to write an autobiography, but her past haunted her. In 1970, at just 56 years old, she was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, likely brought on by years of heavy smoking. She was hospitalized, sent home briefly, and then returned to the hospital, where she died on August 1, alone and far from the spotlight she had once graced. Her life became a cautionary tale of Hollywood's cruelty and the mistreatment of those struggling with mental illness. After her death, sensationalized accounts of her time in psychiatric hospitals continued to fuel public fascination, with books and films dramatizing her suffering. Despite the myths and exaggerations, the truth remains tragic. Frances Farmer was a woman whose brilliance was overshadowed by pain, whose talent was wasted by an industry that never valued her, and whose final years were spent trying to reclaim a dignity that was stolen from her. Their time was cut short, but their legacy lives on. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as we continue remembering those who made a difference but left us too soon. Kay Ballard, a legendary actress, comedian, and singer, left behind an unforgettable legacy when she passed away on January 21, 2019, at the age of 93. The cause of her death was kidney cancer, a battle she fought quietly in her later years. Just weeks before she left this world, she attended the Palm Springs International Film Festival to witness the premiere of her own documentary, Kay Ballard. The show goes on. The theater was packed, the audience cheered, and for a brief moment, she got to see the love and admiration that spanned generations. But behind that moment of celebration, her health was deteriorating. The woman who had spent her entire life lighting up stages and making people laugh was now facing the inevitable, her once booming voice growing quieter. Born Catherine Gloria Bellata in Cleveland, Ohio, on November 20, 1925, Kay had entertainment in her blood from the start. She was the daughter of Italian immigrants and was already mimicking famous performers by the time she was 5. She had the talent, the drive, and an unmistakable comedic presence that set her apart. Instead of following a traditional path, she dove headfirst into the world of show business, first with Spike Jones, and then onto the Broadway stage. She recorded the first ever version of Fly Me to the Moon, starred in The Mothers-in-Law alongside Eve Arden, and graced television screens in classics like The Doris Day Show and The Perry Como Show. Her theatrical career was just as remarkable, spanning decades with standout performances in The Golden Apple, Carnival, Chicago, and many more. But as the years passed, time took its toll. Even though she continued performing into her late 80s, her body began to slow down. By the time she reached her early 90s, she stepped away from the spotlight, spending her final years in the quiet comfort of Rancho Mirage, California. She had lived a full life, one of laughter, music, and an unwavering passion for her craft. But no amount of applause could stop what was coming. As kidney cancer progressed, the vibrant woman who had once commanded the stage with effortless charm found herself retreating into the silence of her home. And then, on that January night in 2019, she took her final bow, leaving behind a world that was just a little less bright without her in it. Donda West was more than just Kanye West's mother. She was his rock, his biggest supporter, and the person who shaped him into the artist the world knows today. But on November 10, 2007, her life was tragically cut short at just 58 years old. She had undergone multiple cosmetic procedures, liposuction, a tummy tuck, and a breast reduction, all in one day. And despite being advised to stay under medical supervision, she insisted on recovering at home. The next day, she complained of chest pain and difficulty breathing before she was rushed to the hospital, where she was pronounced dead. The official cause was coronary artery disease combined with complications from her surgeries. Her death sent shockwaves through the entertainment world and left her son devastated, racked with guilt, believing that if he had never moved to Los Angeles, she might still be alive. In the aftermath, California even passed the Donda West law, requiring patients to receive medical clearance before undergoing elective cosmetic surgery. But before the world knew her as Kanye's mother, she was a highly respected educator, a woman who dedicated her life to teaching and empowering young minds. Born in Oklahoma in 1949, Donda grew up in a family that valued education and activism. Her father was a civil rights activist, and she followed in his footsteps, taking part in a sit-in protest at just 9 years old. She went on to earn her doctorate in English and spent nearly 3 decades shaping students at Chicago State University, where she eventually became the chair of the English department. But everything changed when Kanye's music career started to take off. In 2004, she left academia to support him full-time, managing his business ventures and helping him navigate fame. She was more than just his mother. She was his mentor, his biggest fan, and his guiding force. Kanye never shied away from expressing his love for her, dedicating songs like Hey Mama to her while she was alive, and later naming an entire album after her. Even years after her passing, her influence on him remains undeniable. Her sudden death left an unfillable void in his life, pushing him into some of his darkest moments. He has spoken openly about the pain, the regret, the what-ifs that haunt him. Losing Donda West wasn't just losing a mother. It was losing the person who believed in him before anyone else did. Her story is a heartbreaking reminder of how fragile life is, how even those who seem invincible can be taken away in an instant. But her legacy lives on, not just through her son, but through the countless students she inspired, the impact she made in education, and the love she poured into the world. Rita McNeil, the beloved Canadian singer and songwriter, left the world heartbroken when she passed away on April 16, 2013, due to complications from surgery after a recurring infection. She was 68. Her final days were marked by a battle against this persistent infection, one that she had fought before. But this time, it took a devastating turn. She underwent surgery, a procedure meant to help, but her body could not recover, and the world lost a voice that had carried the stories, struggles, and dreams of so many. There was initial confusion about whether she had contracted the infection in the hospital, but the truth remained that despite her strength, she could not fight it this time. Her passing was a shock, a painful reminder that even the strongest hearts eventually rest. Born on May 28, 1944, in Big Pond, Nova Scotia, Rita grew up in a challenging household, one of 8 children in a family struggling with alcoholism and hardship. She was born with a cleft lip and palate, endured surgeries, and suffered the trauma of childhood abuse. Yet she carried herself with a quiet grace that masked a lifetime of pain. Music became her refuge, her escape, her way of expressing all that she had endured. It wasn't an easy road. She became a mother as a teenager, worked odd jobs to support herself and her children, and for years performed in small venues where she was often overlooked. It wasn't until her 40s that the world finally started paying attention. She released 24 albums, won multiple Juno and Canadian Country Music Association awards, and was even named to the Order of Canada and the Order of Nova Scotia. Her song, Flying on Your Own, became an anthem of resilience, mirroring her own life, and Working Man became a tribute to the hardworking laborers of her homeland. She outsold some of the biggest names in country music, proving that success isn't just about image, it's about heart. But despite her achievements, Rita remained humble, never forgetting her roots. Her voice, powerful yet tender, carried the weight of every struggle she had ever faced. And perhaps that's why people connected with her so deeply. She wasn't just a singer, she was a storyteller, a voice for those who had been overlooked, just as she had been for so long. And when that voice fell silent in 2013, it felt like losing a dear friend, someone who understood the pain, the perseverance, and the beauty in life's hardest moments. Even after her death, her music continues to live on, reminding us that no matter how difficult the journey, there is always a song to carry us through. Jan Crouch, a towering figure in the world of religious broadcasting, passed away on May 31, 2016, at the age of 78, just days after suffering a massive stroke. She spent her final moments in a hospital in Orlando, Florida, where her family gathered around her. The woman who had spent decades bringing faith into people's homes through the Trinity Broadcasting Network, TBN, was suddenly gone, leaving behind a legacy that was both inspiring and controversial. Her passing marked the end of an era for the network she had built with her husband, Paul Crouch, in 1973, transforming it into the world's largest Christian television network. In the days before her stroke, there was no public indication that her health was failing, making her sudden hospitalization a shock to many who followed her ministry. But her later years had been marked by legal battles, family conflicts, and allegations that cast a shadow over her once untouchable image. She was accused of financial mismanagement, spending millions on a lavish lifestyle funded by TBN donations, from expensive homes and private jets to extravagant wigs and plastic surgery. In a particularly shocking lawsuit, her own granddaughter accused her of mishandling a case of sexual assault, claiming Jan had blamed her instead of seeking justice. Despite the controversy, Jan Crouch remained a beloved figure to many, known for her larger-than-life personality, distinctive platinum blonde hair, and deep emotional connection to her audience. Born Janice Wendell Bethany on May 14, 1938, she grew up in a religious household, the daughter of a Pentecostal preacher. Her faith was the foundation of her life, and after marrying Paul Crouch in 1957, the couple set out to create a platform that would spread Christianity to millions. What began as a small venture grew into a media empire, with TBN reaching audiences across the globe. Jan played a crucial role in the network's expansion, overseeing its children's programming and later managing the Holy Land Experience theme park in Orlando. Despite the criticisms and lawsuits, she remained devoted to the cause, seeing herself as a motherly figure to both her viewers and the orphan children she supported through charity work. When she suffered the stroke that would take her life, her family shared the news with the world, calling her Mama Jan, and remembering her as a woman who had dedicated her life to faith and compassion. Her death was met with an outpouring of grief from supporters who had watched her on their screens for decades, but also renewed scrutiny over the empire she helped build. In the end, Jan Crouch's story was one of triumph and controversy, of faith and flaws, of devotion and division. She left behind a network that continues to shape Christian broadcasting, but also a complicated legacy that remains debated to this day. Olivia Goldsmith, a name that once shone brightly in the literary world, left behind a legacy of sharp wit, unforgettable storytelling, and a tragic ending that no one could have foreseen. Born Randy Goldfield on January 1, 1949, in Dumont, New Jersey, she grew up to become a best-selling author, known for her groundbreaking novel, The First Wives Club, which resonated deeply with women and was later adapted into a hugely successful film. But behind the success, behind the name changes and reinventions, from Justine Goldfield to Justine Rendell, and finally Olivia Goldsmith, was a woman searching for happiness, struggling with insecurities, and, in the end, paying the ultimate price for society's relentless pressure on women to remain youthful. On January 7, 2004, Olivia checked into Manhattan Eye, Ear, and Throat Hospital for what was supposed to be a simple, routine cosmetic procedure, a chin tuck, a decision that would lead to her untimely demise. She had undergone similar procedures before, always hoping to match the ideals that she both criticized and explored in her novels. But this time, something went terribly wrong. Even before the surgery began, complications arose. She had opted for general anesthesia, a riskier choice for such a minor procedure. And within moments of being put under, disaster struck. Her body reacted violently, convulsing with massive spasms, and in just 4 minutes, she fell into a coma from which she would never wake. The irony was heartbreaking. Olivia, who had spent much of her literary career exposing the pressures women face to stay young and beautiful, lost her life in an attempt to do just that. Her family, her friends, her readers, none of them could comprehend how a woman so full of life, so successful, could be gone so suddenly, all because of a surgery meant to erase a few lines from her face. Olivia lingered in a coma for days, and on January 15, 2004, she was declared dead at the age of 54. Her tragic end sent shockwaves through the literary world, a grim reminder of the dangers of cosmetic procedures and the unrealistic beauty standards that even the most powerful women struggle with. But before this devastating end, Olivia had lived a life full of reinvention, success, and fierce independence. She had once been a corporate powerhouse, a partner at Booz Allen Hamilton, before walking away to pursue her true passion, writing. Her books, often laced with humor and biting social commentary, spoke to women who had been wronged, overlooked, or cast aside. The First Wives Club became a symbol of female empowerment, a revenge fantasy turned cultural phenomenon, giving a voice to women who had been discarded by the men who once loved them. She had a knack for crafting stories that felt real because they were drawn from her own experiences, heartbreak, reinvention, and survival. She lived life on her own terms, surrounding herself with wealth, glamour, and a rotating circle of friends and lovers, never staying in one place or with one person for too long. She could be dazzling, generous, and fiercely loyal, but also elusive, enigmatic, and difficult to pin down. Her relationships, whether romantic or platonic, often burned bright and then faded just as quickly. She gave love the way she gave gifts, extravagantly, intensely, and then sometimes not at all. Her death left so many questions. Why did she feel the need to go under the knife? Did she, like the characters in her novels, believe that beauty equaled power? And if so, how did a woman who had made millions exposing these very truths fall victim to them herself? The loss of Olivia Goldsmith was more than just the loss of a talented writer. It was a loss of a woman who had fought, in her own way, to redefine what it meant to be powerful, to be independent, to be a woman in a world that often discarded them too soon. Her final days, spent unconscious in a hospital bed, were a stark contrast to the vibrant, unrelenting energy she had carried through life. And as the world mourned her, one thing became painfully clear. Olivia Goldsmith had lived for reinvention. But in the end, it was the pursuit of that reinvention that took her life. Billie Holiday, the voice that shook the world with its raw emotion, died on July 17, 1959, at just 44 years old, alone in a hospital bed, handcuffed, under police guard, and stripped of almost everything she had. She had been one of the greatest jazz singers of all time, her voice soaked in pain, telling stories of love, heartbreak, and injustice. But in the end, her own story ended in tragedy. She had been diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver earlier that year, her body already weakened from years of alcohol and heroin addiction. By the time she was admitted to Metropolitan Hospital in New York in May 1959, she was frail, weighing nearly 20 pounds less than before. Friends and colleagues begged her to seek help, but the damage had already been done. Even in her final days, the system that had failed her so many times came back to haunt her. Narcotics officers raided her hospital room, claiming they had found heroin, and placed her under arrest, keeping her under police guard as she lay dying. She was denied proper treatment, and as her body deteriorated, she was left to suffer. On July 15, a priest was called to perform last rites, and 2 days later, she took her last breath, her heart failing under the weight of it all. A woman who had given the world so much music, so much soul, died with just 70 cents in her bank account. Born Eleanor Fagan on April 7, 1915, in Philadelphia, she was abandoned by her father and left to navigate a world that was unkind to a young black girl with a dream. Raised in poverty, she found solace in music, inspired by the voices of Bessie Smith and Louis Armstrong. By her teenage years, she was singing in Harlem nightclubs, her voice carrying a pain that felt too deep for someone so young. Discovered by producer John Hammond, she recorded her first songs in the 1930s, and soon her career skyrocketed. Her ability to turn lyrics into pure emotion set her apart. Songs like Strange Fruit, a haunting protest against lynching, cemented her place in history. But with fame came struggles. She battled addiction, abusive relationships, and relentless racism, all while trying to keep her career alive. In 1947, she was arrested for drug possession and spent time in prison, unable to perform in nightclubs due to a revoked cabaret card. Still, she fought back, filling Carnegie Hall and continuing to record. But by the 1950s, the years of pain, drugs, and legal troubles caught up with her. Her voice, once smooth and soaring, had become weathered, heavy with the weight of her suffering. Her final album, Lady in Satin, was filled with heartbreak, her voice cracked and broken, yet still powerful. And then, as if the world had taken all it could from her, it let her slip away. The woman who had sung of love and loss with unmatched depth had lost her own battle, not just to addiction, but to a society that never truly protected her. Yet Billie Holiday's voice never really died. Her music still lingers, her pain still felt, her story still told, a reminder of both the beauty and brutality of life. Gone too soon but never forgotten. Their legacy continues to inspire. If you found this tribute meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as we honor more unforgettable stars.